Hello, welcome. My name is Emily Fair, and I am a senior career counselor within the Career Center of Links Connect. This presentation will focus on resumes, cover letters, and briefly on CVs. We'll first be talking about resumes and spend the majority of the time on resumes. There are some activities that are part of this session of the presentation. So I encourage you to pause the video and complete the activities as they come along. So first, just want to give an overview of what a resume is. Odds are you've heard of this document before, but it is a short document, 1 or 2 pages in length, that talk about your experiences, paid or unpaid, your education, your qualifications, achievements, and skills. The purpose of a resume is to demonstrate that you have the skills and abilities needed to succeed in the position you are applying for, so that way you will land an interview. And there is no correct formatting for a resume, as long as it is well organized and cleanly formatted and consistent in terms of what you are bolding or italicizing or alignment. A clean resume actually stands out a lot better than one that has a lot of color in it or a lot of designs. So I want to go over some basic resume sections. If you have your resume with you, I definitely encourage you to pull it up, have it on your laptop or print it out next to you and make notes as we go through. If you've never built a resume before, that's okay. This slide will provide information on the basic sections to go into your resume so you can start mapping it out. So contact information is on every resume. This should include your name, which should be the largest thing on your resume, because if employers get 25 to 50 resumes submitted for a position and they have to scroll through all of them, they want to be able to quickly spot yours. So make sure your name is a bit larger than other text on your resume. Also include both a phone number and email for them to reach you at. Some people like to give you a call to offer you an interview, and some prefer to email you. So make sure you have 2 options for them. And also make sure you have a voicemail set up on your phone. I know we don't call each other as frequently as we used to, but employers may call you to offer you an interview or even offer you a job, and you don't want to give a bad impression by having a voicemail set up that isn't professional or is joking or funny. Same thing regarding email. Make sure you're using a professional email when you are applying for jobs. Also include your city, state, and zip code, but you don't need any personal information. Don't include anything about your gender identity, your age. Don't include a picture of yourself. And that's because we want to eliminate as much bias as we can in the hiring process. I know some other countries will actually ask for your date of birth or for a picture of yourself, but in the United States, we want to eliminate that as much as possible. So just city, state, and zip code. It's optional to have the link to your LinkedIn profile. If you have a LinkedIn that's really robust with a lot of information, with links to articles that you've published or videos that you've made, definitely feel free to include that, but it's not necessary. Same with the link to your website or portfolio. I know there are some positions that will actually ask to see a portfolio, especially in design or marketing, graphic design. So in that case, it might be helpful to have a link to your website or portfolio, but most positions won't require something like that. Another section that is on every resume is education. List the degree that you're currently pursuing first, whether that's a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. Even if you don't have it, as long as you're enrolled in that program, you want it to be listed first. High school is optional. Typically, I see high school drop-off resumes once you reach your sophomore year, because at that point, you're accumulating more experiences in college, more part-time jobs, joining clubs or organizations that are more relevant than what you've done in high school. By the time you're a junior in college, typically high school is removed from your resume. Your education section can also include any honors. So if you've ever been on the dean's list, absolutely feel free to include that. Same if you graduate with honors, such as cum laude or summa cum laude, or if you have a high GPA, you're welcome to include that. less and less employers are using GPA as a requirement for landing a job. They're more interested in your experience and skills. So if you have a GPA you're not particularly proud of, don't feel the need to add it to your resume. GPA is very optional and not expected anymore. Another thing you could put in education is relevant courses. I find this is helpful for individuals who haven't had a lot of experience yet. Maybe you're working a full-time job and really don't have time for clubs or organizations or other leadership roles, but you want to add more to your resume to show that you do have training in the area for which you're applying for. In that case, a relevant courses, not necessarily section, but just a list of some of those courses could be helpful to get more keywords on your resume and show that you have training in the area you are applying for. And then lastly, experience. This shows up on resumes in many different forms. I want to emphasize that it could include paid or unpaid activities. So even if you had an unpaid internship, you were volunteering, you were a member of the Student Government Association, this can all go under a experience header. Some ways you could organize this could be relevant experience and additional experience, and I'll show you some other ways of organizing it on the next slide. And for each experience, you do want to include your title, the organization you were working for, volunteering for, assisting with, the city and state of where this event took place, and the time frame, so month and year. And then we recommend adding bullet points as well to illustrate some of the skills and tasks that you did within each of these roles. And there are many optional resume sections as well. So like I mentioned, experiences can come in many different shapes and sizes. I would think about what all you have done during your time in grad school, college, or high school if you're new to college. And also think about what would you want the hiring committee to know? Maybe you're studying engineering and there's some really great projects that you did in your classes. In that case, it might be worth adding a project section. Or say that you're applying to a nonprofit organization. It might be worth adding that one weekend experience where you helped plant trees, just to show that you have volunteered with a nonprofit organization before. So I have a list of some of those different ways you can organize experience and other things you can put on your resume here. These are just examples. There's even more optional sections than this, but just wanted to give you an idea of what all could go on a resume. Could be research experience, leadership roles that you've had, professional organizations that you're a member of, like Alpha Phi or the American Psychological Association. You could also have a section for skills. This is pretty common on resumes. If you do have a skills section, I would recommend making it focused on technical skills, like Adobe Illustrator or Microsoft Excel, or even Zoom for that matter. Because soft skills or people skills, such as communication or teamwork, organization, those tend to be better illustrated in your bullet points. So you can illustrate how you've used those skills and how you have them. Pretty much anyone could say, I have good communication skills on your resume. But unless you list it in a bullet point and explain that you've communicated with up to 50 individuals a day over phone and email by running the front desk, no one truly believes you have those skills. So I'd recommend focusing on technical skills if you want to have a skills section. And then just a few other examples here, clubs and organizations, awards and honors. This could be a section on its own if you have a lot of honors and awards that you want to showcase. Volunteer experience or even extracurricular activities. So there's many ways to organize your experience on your resume. And I again encourage you just to think about what have you done and what would you want an employer to know. Also have to talk a little bit about formatting. I'm sure this is everyone's favorite part of writing resumes. You want your resume to be 1 or 2 pages in length. Once it goes beyond 2 pages, it becomes a CV, which we'll talk a little bit about. And I would recommend sticking to 1 page if you're still early in your career and don't have a lot of experiences yet, because it's better to have a 1-page resume full of very relevant information than trying to stretch it onto 2 pages by adding in times that you walked dogs in middle school, to just try to space it out. So better to have a one-page resume that's very relevant than squeezing it onto 2 pages. And if you do decide to go onto 2 pages, I'd recommend filling up at least 75% of that second page to justify having a second page on your resume. Use a simple font throughout, something that's easy to read. I have a few examples here like Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, although the header can be different if you want your name to stand out. We recommend sticking with 11 to 12 point font. Any smaller than that, and it can get challenging for an employer to read, although your name can be bigger. Also recommend sticking between 0.5 and 1 inch margins. Margins are actually an easy thing to adjust if you're struggling to fit your resume down to 1 page. You could easily shrink those margins from 1 inch to 0.5 inch, and that will give you a lot more room. Same with the header and footer. So little tip if you need to squeeze things onto your resume. As I mentioned before, just be consistent with how you're spacing and aligning things. So if you're bolding all of your position titles, make sure they're all bolded. If you're aligning all your dates on the right, make sure they're all lined up together. So just being really picky about those details. Also spell out all acronyms. So most people know what CU Denver is, but perhaps the person who is reviewing your application just moved here and isn't entirely sure what that stands for or what SGA stands for. So when in doubt, spell all acronyms out. I also don't recommend using a template. I know there are many templates out there in Google Docs and Microsoft Word, and there's a lot of pretty looking ones in Canva, but templates cause issues. For one, applicant tracking systems can't read them. And I'll talk more about what that is in a moment, but it's a software that ranks resumes by how closely they match the job description. And that software may not be able to read your resume if you submit a template. It'll show up blank. So we really recommend against templates. Another reason is because it becomes very frustrating to edit them. And we recommend tailoring your resume for every position you apply for. And it's going to get very frustrating very fast when you want to add in more bullet points or add in a section and the template has these invisible boxes that you can't move or adjust and you can't get it to look the way you want it to. So highly recommend avoiding templates and just sticking with a blank Google Doc or a blank Word document instead. So as I mentioned, tailoring your resume is very important and something we recommend doing for every position you apply to. In terms of why it is important, one of the reasons that I already mentioned is applicant tracking software. This is a software that more and more companies are using to rank resumes electronically based on the keywords in the job description. It's very common to find ATSs in engineering and tech. Not as common if you're applying to smaller organizations focused on community service or nonprofits, but it is good to know that it's out there. It's possible that once the ATS ranks resumes, a human eye may only look at the top 20 or 15. If you ever apply to a position and get what seems to be an automatic rejection almost as soon as you apply, odds are it's an applicant tracking software who looked at your resume and told you don't match the qualifications. So that's why it's really important to take the time to make sure the keywords in the job description are in your resume. I want to refer you to Resume Worded or SkillSyncer to test your resumes if you want to learn more about this ATS and what the system looks like. SkillSyncer you can use for free for a year with your ucdenver.edu email, and you can upload your resume and a job description, and it will tell you what keywords you're missing. Or it'll say like the words project management is in the job description 4 times and you only have it once in your resume, so you might want to add it in. Resume Worded will give you more information outside of just keywords. It'll have other formatting suggestions, and will give you a percentage match back by how closely you match the job description. You can pay for a premium version of Resume Worded. I wouldn't bother. I would just take the advice that you can get for free. And don't feel like you have to use all the advice that either of these websites provide you with. If you do everything they say, your personality could be lost in your resume. So just use it as a way to play around in these tools if you're curious to see what an applicant tracking software sees when you upload your resume. Another reason it's so important to tailor your resume is that they're actually reviewed for only an average of 8 seconds. That's really fast. So if someone is quickly glancing over your resume, they're not reading it, they're scanning it for just a few seconds, they need to quickly be able to see the keywords that they're looking for. So not only do you have to tailor your resume because of applicant tracking software, but because there may be recruiters who aren't using ATSs, but they're still glancing at resumes very quickly and need to quickly spot what they want to see. Another tip, always apply for a position through the company's website. Indeed and LinkedIn don't always update as quickly as the company's website, so there is a chance you could be spending time tailoring your resume to a position that's no longer active. Company websites sometimes also have more information in terms of what they want from you in an application. Maybe it's a resume, cover letter, and a sample of your writing. And if you do the quick apply option through Indeed or LinkedIn, it won't have an option for you to upload that writing sample, and it won't look like you have a complete application. So always apply through the company website whenever you can. So now that I've stressed the importance of tailoring your resume, I want to give you an opportunity to practice identifying keywords. On the next slide, I have a position description. I actually had to cut it down. It was very long, so I cut it down to fit on the slide. And I want you to look at it and just think to yourself, what are some of the keywords that are coming up for you when you look at this? So here's that position description. So I encourage you to pause this video just for a minute or two, give yourself a moment to read through this description and think to yourself, what are the keywords here? So go ahead and take a moment to pause. So now you've taken a moment to look at this job posting and think to yourself, what are the keywords in here that I should have in my resume if I was applying to this position? I also went through and looked at this description and highlighted the keywords that jumped out at me. So you're about to see a lot of color on the next slide. This is by no means all of the keywords in this job description, but these are the ones that I noticed that came up quite a bit or were repeated. So I highlighted them to point out to you. In yellow, we have some verbs. These would be really great action verbs to start your own bullet points with. So say you worked the front desk at an office on campus. Maybe that involved tracking people who came in and out of the office. Maybe you had to manage checking them in and out, or manage the materials that people were renting from the wellness center. Maybe you had to present to your boss some findings that you had from working at the front desk. I would use the same words here in yellow in your resume. Same with the words highlighted in green. These are some of the more technical words that this position is looking for. So hoping to have someone who has experience with research, that's in here twice. So if you've ever done research, like maybe you had to write a research paper for your class, or you were part of a lab, having a research section, or at least talking about research that you've done, would be really great on your resume. They're also hoping to see someone who's done analysis, maybe has written proposals and worked with policies or project management. In blue, I highlighted more of the administrative tasks they're looking for. Someone who's worked with communication materials. That could really be like Microsoft Outlook. So you could mention that you use that in your job on campus or other job that you've had. Especially if you've ever worked with calendars, scheduling, sending out meeting invites. That seems to be pretty important for this job. And then lastly, I also highlighted in pink their minimum qualifications. Whenever you see minimum qualifications in a job description, we need to make sure employers see that right off the bat. They say a bachelor's degree is a minimum, so I would have education be your very first section on your resume. They also say they require 2 years of full-time professional experience. So in that case, I would probably have work experience or relevant experience be your next section on your resume. And then talking about your awards and honors or your research experience could go after those sections because those are minimum qualifications. We want employers to immediately see that you meet what they need right off the bat. So now I showed you a position that I found online, and I encourage you to do the same thing. I imagine you're on your laptops watching this video, or if you haven't already, feel free to pull your laptop out or even your cell phone and go ahead and search online to find a job that you're interested in. This could be a part-time job on campus, maybe a full-time job for the future. It doesn't necessarily mean you're applying to it right now, but just something that sounds cool, that sounds intriguing. And I encourage you to copy that position and paste it into a Google Doc or a Word document and highlight the keywords that jump out at you, just like we did here for the legislative analyst position. Once you've highlighted those words, it'll probably take a few minutes or so for you to do that, maybe around 5 minutes, 5 to 10. And then compare your resume to the words that you highlighted. Which ones aren't in your resume that would be good to add? Especially noting what words appear multiple times in that job description. And these could be words that appear under responsibilities, expectations, qualifications. There might be different sections, but multiple words show up or are repeated throughout these sections. So again, I encourage you to pause at this time to find a job description and practice highlighting on your own. So go ahead and take a few minutes to do that. So now at this point, I hope you've taken the time to practice identifying keywords. This is a skill that will be helpful for you throughout your entire life in the job search process. So with that being said, we now know how to identify keywords and if they're in our resume or not. SkillSyncer is also a great tool for that if you're hoping to have AI assistance outside of artificial intelligence assistance, outside of just using your own human eyes. So now that we have those keywords, we need to make sure they're in our resume. Typically, those keywords will go into bullet points. There is a magic formula for bullet points that you would use every time you write one. And that is starting with an action verb, then talking about the task, what you did, and then the result or purpose. So why did you do this? Or what was the outcome? A lot of people neglect this last part of the bullet point formula, the result or purpose, but whenever you can add it in, it really strengthens the bullet point because it illustrates to employer, look, I did this in my past job. I could do this for you too. Some other tips I want to share around bullet points is to try and avoid listing no more than 6. Typically, once you have 6 bullet points, it becomes very long to the point where it's a wall of text and a little time consuming for the employer to read. Again, they're only scanning your resume for a couple seconds. So if they see a lot of bullet points, odds are they won't read them all, maybe just the first one. But if they see 4, that's more easy for them to take the time to read. Note the tenses of your verbs. So if a position is in the past, then you want your verbs to be in past tense. And if you're currently in the position, then you want your verbs to be in present tense. I also really encourage you to quantify whenever you can, which means adding numbers to your bullet points. So if you were part of a student organization and you did fundraising, include the amount of money that you raised. If you were part of a group project, include how many teammates that you worked with. If you're a tutor on campus, how many students do you tutor per week? If you are in a lab, how many trials did you have to run? How many students do you talk to at the front desk position? Including numbers whenever you can will really strengthen your bullet points and illustrate to an employer the amount of work that you did. A lot of these examples I gave were for on-campus positions, but even if you've had a full-time job, think about what numbers can you add in here? Maybe how frequently you held meetings, what size budget you were managing, how many appointments you had per day with students. Whatever it was, adding in those numbers really helps and makes the bullet points pop. Employers' eyes are immediately drawn towards numbers. And then just like we've been doing, use the job description as a cheat sheet. Don't feel like you have to come up with these bullet points all on your own. If you're struggling, just look at the job description to see what verbs they're starting their responsibilities with, or what keywords they're looking for. Like maybe they want someone who has experience with email, someone who has experience working independently. Then that would be a great thing to write about in your bullet point. I have some examples here to illustrate what a weak bullet point looks like compared to a strong one. So this would be an okay bullet point. We have an action verb, responsible, and we have the task, laboratory practices, but I can't really tell what this person did for their laboratory practices or how often. There's no quantifying and there's no purpose. This bullet point is a little bit better. Meet with 4 research assistants to design an experimental process. We have our action verb, meet. We have a number, 4, which is great. And we have the purpose, to design an experimental process. So this is a much stronger bullet point, but it's still lacking some detail. This last bullet point is great. Collaborate with 4 research assistants to design experimental processes aimed at evaluating the evolutionary properties of bacteria. We've got a really strong action verb, collaborate. We have that quantifying 4, and I have more information on the purpose. It was to design an experimental process aimed at evaluating bacteria properties. If you were applying for a position in a lab, this would be a great bullet point to have on your resume because it shows that you can work as a team, you understand experimental processes, and you know how to evaluate. I have one more example for you. So this is an okay bullet point, answered student questions about housing. We have an action verb, no quantifying or purpose though. This bullet point is a little bit stronger. Responded to student inquiries about housing over the phone and email. I get a better idea of how you're responding to these students, phone and email, so that provides me more context of your abilities if I were to hire you. But this last bullet point is really great. Managed housing inquiries for 750 students, including answering calls, responding to email, and disseminating flyers to build community engagement. We have an awesome action verb, managed. Really great quantifying, 750 students. That's maybe the amount of students that were in the dorm that you worked for. I also have some more of the tasks of what you did, answering calls, responding to emails, disseminating flyers, and I have the purpose. You did this to build community engagement. So if I was looking to hire someone to be a project manager or a team lead or a liaison with the community, I would be really interested to see that this person already knows how to build community engagement. And if they did that in this housing unit, maybe they could do that for me if I hired them. That's the power of adding the purpose to your bullet point. So once again, I'm going to encourage you to pause this video in a moment to rewrite or write a new bullet point using those keywords that you highlighted. So in our previous activity, you found a job description that you're interested in and you highlighted keywords. Now I want you to pick 1 or 2 of those keywords and see if you can add them into your bullet point. Maybe you have to take something out to add them in, maybe switch out the verb that the bullet point starts with. Or if you're creating a resume from scratch, feel free to write a totally new bullet point using those keywords in the job description. So again, go ahead and pause the video here and take a moment to do that. So now I hope you've taken the time to practice writing a bullet point. Writing bullet points is the most time-consuming part of a resume, but the more you do it, the easier it will become and the more comfortable you'll be with it. So I want to address something that might be the elephant in the room of, can't I just ask artificial intelligence to write my resume? Not quite. If you want to stand out, it's helpful to use AI strategically. I know ChatGPT is a very popular AI tool nowadays. There's many others out there that are coming into existence and that are already in existence, and they can be helpful, but it won't be able to convey your unique personality or your values, which is really what helps you stand out from other applicants in a resume and especially in a cover letter. If everyone has ChatGPT write their resume, they're going to look very similar and you won't stand out from anyone. That doesn't mean that AI can't be helpful though. So here are some things that you could use ChatGPT or another AI tool for. You could copy and paste the job description and you could say, please tell me the top 15 keywords within this job description. And it can tell you that. You could also copy and paste your entire resume into ChatGPT and say, do you see those 15 keywords that you told me in my resume? And it will easily be able to tell you you're lacking this, or you do have these in here. So it can be helpful in that way. It can also be helpful if you're trying to generate metrics. So maybe you're really struggling to find a way of quantifying your bullet point. You could copy and paste that bullet point into ChatGPT and say, what are ways I could add metrics into this bullet point? And then adjust it in a way that's true to that role. You could also ask ChatGPT to write an alternate bullet point or even a sentence within your cover letter by saying, like, what is a way that I could reword this sentence to sound more robust or to use more professional language? And it can give you suggestions. However, there are some things you can use to make ChatGPT work better for you. I definitely recommend being very clear and specific. You get out what you put into it. So if you just say, write me a resume, you're going to get a very terrible resume that doesn't have a lot of detail because it doesn't know you. It doesn't know your experiences. It doesn't know what kind of job you're applying for. So add in as much information and be as specific as possible when asking for directions from ChatGPT or other AI tools. Also, don't include any confidential information. These machines do remember all of the information that is input into them. That's how they learn. So anything that you share with ChatGPT will be stored in its database. So be careful not to share anything that is too confidential. I've also heard that ChatGPT will sometimes put out documents that have spelling errors in them. So just be sure to double check everything, as you should be anyway, because what they print or what they give to you as a suggestion won't be in your own voice with your own personality. So feel free to use it as a jumping off point, especially if you're really struggling to, write that introductory paragraph in your cover letter or write a bullet point for your resume, but always edit it so that it's true to you and represents you as an individual. So with all that being said, we are now done with resumes, and I want to very briefly touch upon curriculum vitae or CVs, as they're popularly known. In terms of the difference between a resume and CV, the biggest and most obvious one is that resumes have a page limit and CVs do not. Resumes, you want to tailor them to the position you're applying for, whereas CVs are just one big list of everything you've ever done. So you don't really need to tailor it to a job description as much as just keep adding to it constantly. For every position you've held, every class you've taught, paper you published, conference you attended, all of that should go into your CV. Resumes are also very focused on bullet points because that's how you display to an employer that you have the skills and qualifications that they're looking for, whereas CVs are more concise. They're more like a list of everything you've ever done and don't necessarily have bullet points, especially once you get further into your career. When you begin your career and maybe you're applying to a graduate program that asks for a CV, your CV is probably going to look very similar to your resume. If you haven't had a lot of experiences yet, I would say go ahead and add bullet points into your CV. And then 30 years down the road, once you're further in your career and you have a lot more to add to your CV, I would get rid of all those bullet points. Resumes are also commonly used when applying for just jobs in general, for industry position, nonprofit, or public sector positions. And CVs are more commonly seen when applying for positions in academia. So it could be a graduate program, PhD programs, grants or fellowships, or being a professor. But typically, most jobs will not ask for a CV. They prefer a resume. And whereas resumes emphasize skills, CVs are more a list of your academic achievements. To very briefly talk about the formatting, resumes and CVs look really similar in terms of formatting, aside from the length of the document and bullet points. Because CVs are longer, I'd recommend keeping your first name or your last name and a page number on every page so that someone can quickly see that this is all one document, this is all for the same person. CVs, again, aren't really tailored to the job description as much. So normally education is listed first, always. They are typically used more for academic purposes. References are also not included in resumes. Historically, they were, but now job applications will ask you for references, and you'll type that in as you're filling out the application. So you don't need to put that on your resume. However, CVs typically do still include references, and that's normally the very last section on your CV. And just want to emphasize, if you're feeling stressed about writing a CV, odds are you don't have to. Odds are the position you're applying for doesn't ask for one. But in the odd chance that it does specifically say they want a CV, your very first CV will look very similar to a resume. Very similar formatting. You'll probably have bullet points in it, but maybe it's 3 pages instead of 2. So don't worry about CVs too much. If you have further questions around them, we are always happy to answer those within the Career Center. And then for our final topic today, I want to focus on cover letters. A cover letter answers the question, why should I hire you? The employer can see from your resume that you meet the qualifications, but odds are there's probably about 5 other people, maybe even more, who also meet the qualifications. So why should they hire you compared to all these other individuals? Your cover letter is a chance to say, I'm passionate about your organization. Your mission and your values align with mine. Here's what I can bring to your company. So you don't want to just copy and paste what's on your resume. Dive deep into your experiences by sharing stories about what inspired you to go into this career or apply to this organization. And pull specific information from their website. So don't necessarily just copy and paste their mission, but say, I see that you work with this population or you're very involved in the community, which is something I'm also passionate about, to show that you've done your research. And then lastly, a cover letter also showcases your ability to write. A lot of jobs nowadays will have you writing. Even in tech or engineering, you'll probably have to write professional emails and communicate professionally in presentations. So they want to make sure that you are good at writing and can write clearly and concisely. I want to give you a brief breakdown of the outline of a cover letter. So same as your resume, you'll have a header with your name, phone number, email, city, state, and zip code. I would honestly just copy and paste the same header that's on your resume and put it on your cover letter, so that way your materials match. Within your header, you also want to add the date. That's just a formal way of showing I wrote this letter at the time before the application deadline, and it's just more traditional and formal to have the date on the cover letter. It has become optional to add the recipient's address. If you Google search cover letter examples, you probably will see the full company address for the position you're applying to. This was done so that when cover letters were folded into thirds and put into an envelope, the address would show in the envelope window so the post person would know where to deliver it. Cover letters are all done electronically and submitted electronically nowadays, so you don't need the company's full address. I'd say it's optional. If you're struggling to fill up a page for your cover letter, then you could add it. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it. And cover letters are always 1 page in length. Resumes can be two, but it's very rare you see a two-page cover letter. The only time I've run into that is if it's someone applying for a CEO or director level role. Otherwise, I'd highly recommend just keeping your cover letter to 1 page in length. And then you do want to write who you're addressing this cover letter to. If you have the person's name, that's fantastic, and absolutely include their name. If you're not sure, then I would say, Dear Hiring Committee. That's the safest way to go because it's better to say Dear Hiring Committee than accidentally get the person's name wrong. However, again, if you know the person who is on the hiring committee and who will be reading your cover letter, then definitely include their name. So after the header with your contact information, the date, and dear whoever, you'll have an introductory paragraph. Within this paragraph, you want to identify the position you're applying to. Mention if anyone referred you to the position. For instance, maybe you know someone who worked there, or you spoke to someone who worked there who said, I'd be happy to be a reference for you. Include that in your introductory paragraph. And then also state why you're applying using information about the company from their website. So again, this is a chance to show that you've done your research. Say, I really aligned with your mission, or I found you through this website and I was really amazed at the work you're doing, and it aligns with my background and my education, and I'm excited to bring my skills to your company. Something that's not generic, but shows you've done your research and it's specific to this position. Then the bulk of your cover letter will be body paragraphs. This could be 2 or 3 paragraphs that really talk about why you're qualified using examples. So again, don't just copy and paste from your resume, but dive deeper into the experiences on your resume by telling stories or giving more examples. When in doubt, always go back to the job description to see what keywords or skills they're looking for. And connect your experiences back to the organization's mission and values to show that you're a good fit for them. It's also helpful if you can point out what you can bring to the organization. For example, maybe at CU Denver, you've had experience working with a very diverse student body or a lot of international students. And that's something that you could bring to this organization, is your awareness of those diverse identities and the role that they play. And then lastly, you'll have a conclusion. And in this conclusion, typically just a few sentences long, reiterate your passion for this position and the organization, and thank them for their consideration. So at this point, this concludes my presentation on resumes, CVs, and cover letters. If you are interested to see examples of these documents, you can find them in Handshake by going to ucdenver.joinhandshake.com. And then you can click Career Center and then Resources. You can also click Appointments if you want to schedule an appointment with us. And under Resources, we have a resume guide and cover letter guide, and a guide on resume and CV guide, and a guide on cover letters. So definitely feel free to reference those guides for more information, for a recap of what I talked about today, and to see some examples. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with the Career Center, you can do so through Handshake, like I showed you, or you are welcome to call us at 303-315-4000, or you can always stop by in person. We're located in the Tivoli, but in the Tivoli Annex, meaning that you have to exit into the Tivoli courtyard and then re-enter the building. It's a little tricky to find us. We're right in between iPie and the brewery. So I always say that if you start to smell something really good or really weird, you're probably getting close. So please feel free to schedule an appointment with us for more information. And thank you for joining today.